Bonjour tout le monde. This is Robert. Today we're going to explore foreign language, second language, elective, and circumstantial L2 learning and identity. So, first let's differentiate between foreign language and second language. So, a foreign language is a language that is learned that is not the majority language spoken in the country where it is learned. For instance, I learned French as a foreign language because French is neither a majority language where I grew up nor where I went to college in Ohio. And my ELL student started learning English as a foreign language in South Korea. Now, what is a second language? A second language is any language beyond the L1 that is learned. In the context of learning, it would be the language or languages of the majority in the country of residence while learning. So, my ELL student, once she came over here to the United States, English would be taken as a second language in the context of her learning because it is a language of the environment in which she finds herself. Next, let's differentiate between elective L2 learning and circumstantial L2 learning. So, elective L2 learning, as the name suggests, would be by choice. And as Ortega cites or defines, it is learning that takes place from a majority position of equal power and hence no evident or immediate power struggles. And not very many studies have been done here, and those that have been done on people who have travel experiences or study experiences where that language is spoken. Circumstantial L2 learning, on the other hand, happens when somebody who speaks a minority language has to learn that language because they find themselves in an area where that language is the majority language, and these reasons are beyond their control. And examples of these kinds of reasons would be immigration, displacement due to violence, and the aftermath of colonialism. Sometimes the learning that takes place here is a naturalistic context because they are in the environment and they learn from the environment. So for me, French is something that I freely chose over Spanish because it is something that I wanted to do. I didn't need to learn French to integrate into my community. However, for those learning English because of circumstantial L2 learning, or any other language for that matter, it becomes necessary in order for them to integrate into the community. Next up, I'd like to address the link between the two, something that's shared, and a common goal between the two is to sound like a native speaker. So to lose all trace of being seen as an outsider, so anything that could be seen as foreign, such as an accent, grammar that's not matching up to the language of the majority, that kind of a thing. The goal is to sound like a native speaker. And because this is a high goal, lofty goal, especially when you consider the age, identity issues can result from this. And this is something that I'll address in a little bit. From a personal experience, because I wanted to sound like a native French speaker, I would often listen to French music and practice speaking the lyrics of the song. I did this because we never spoke in my high school classes, and it was something that I felt that I needed to do. I also took advantage of a French pronunciation class while I was at Miami University. Next up, I'd like to talk a little bit about motivation and L2 learning, because this is very, very important, especially if we marry this up with identity and success in the L2. I'm not going to go into a lot of details with the slide, but I will say that the factors on the left, regardless of the learning context of the L2, play a role in how that L2 connects to identity. If the experiences, opinions, and orientations are positive, it will have a positive impact on identity and language. The reverse is also true. So if there's a bad experience with a lot of native speakers, it may make the person not want to talk or communicate, be self-conscious, and weary of using the language. The goal is wanting to feel a part of the community. Additionally, to be successful as a learner, you have to have relatively high levels of effort, enjoyment, and investment in the L2. So you have to try, you have to like it relatively, and you have to have a reason true to who you are or based on your environmental needs. So identity and L2 learning. So the goal is to move from a place of other to being a part of the larger group. So to go from a place where a person might feel negative about their language use to a place of positive connections to the community. However, sometimes for non-native speakers in situations like schools, feelings of powerlessness can cause struggles and therefore impact identity. So in the classroom, the teacher and the students play a role here. Oftentimes, immigrants will be defined as having a heroic immigrant identity. Students will sometimes use their personal stories of their immigration stories or that of their family to their advantage. Something that we must be careful of is something cited from Ortega, in that immigrants are sometimes viewed as having some kind of deficiency, and that teachers sometimes will put the image of students who always try, however, they often struggle. That's something that's dangerous, as we'll see in the next slide. So, it is very dangerous to have an identity label thrust unfairly or fairly on the non-native speaker. And also, something that we must consider is the importance of understanding that identity changes over time. You are not stuck with one identity based on our experiences. Our identity can change. So, why is this dangerous? Let's take a look again at what is defined in our Ortega text. So there were 3 ESL students who were tracked because they were non-native speakers. And in this class, they experienced divisions, being cast as being other, where it ended up being something like your country versus the United States. A danger that we must work to avoid is pushing the idea of the international student and that they're newcomers who need to be socialized into new ways of being. This can be very consequential in a negative manner. Because of this, these 3 specific students who were well above the ability of where they were tracked became bored and frustrated. And these 3 students decided that they weren't going to continue with their ESL classes because they were not required.